friends, it's Christy back with you on the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the new Stacy Yakola set, Peaceful Birds. So I have stamped these images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Extreme Black Hybrid ink, and I've done that on 2 different panels. The second panel has very similar images, so I will just be coloring this one here on screen for you today. The second one I'll do off screen to save some time in the video, and I will be using my Copic markers. I went ahead and pulled out some neutral gray tones. I wanted my birdhouse to look like it was made of weathered wood. So I'm using N0, N1, N3, and N5, although I ended up not actually using the N0, so just the darkest 3 shades are what is going to go into the birdhouse. I'm starting with the N5, my darkest, and putting a shadow up under the roof, and then also delineating each of the different boards that are making up the front of the structure. I also did put a shadow down at the bottom where that birdhouse is standing on the platform. And then I'm going to come in with my mid-tone, the N3, and begin to blend out the N5, making sure to just catch the edge of that and pull that darkest color into the middle, and saving some room for that lightest shade, the N1, to just flick really quickly in and fill in the rest of that space so we get that nice bit of contrast in there. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the pole that the birdhouse is standing on, starting again with that N5. This time I put a shadow up at the top and then just down the right hand side because it's pretty narrow, so I didn't want to do a shadow on both sides. Then I'm going to darken up this combo by keeping the N5. This is now going to become my lightest shade in this new combo, and I'm adding in the N7 and the N9, and I'm going to do the roof of the birdhouse and the platform that it's standing on. So adding a little touch of that N9 first. A little bit does go a long way because it is a very dark shade. So I'm just using the very tip of that marker so I can get really fine little strokes there. And I'm also going to color the inside of the birdhouse so it looks nice and shadowy in there. Then I'll bring in the N7 and begin to blend that out. Again, just keeping that marker kind of perpendicular, kind of using the very tip of that so that it doesn't get too heavy-handed there, and saving a little bit of room for that lightest shade, the N5, and I'll use that to fill everything in so I get a nice little bit of highlight on the very top. Once I'm done with the N5, I'm going to move on to some of my branches and leaves, and I'm going to start with these kind of bulbous style pods. I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but I think they look really cool. And I went with a kind of mustard yellow, a burnt mustard shade, using YR21, YR23, and YR27. So I'm going to color the bulbs themselves and then also the stems I wanted to match. So I'm using the YR27 down at the bottom of those stems, and then I'll blend up with the YR23. Just take that up further toward the top, and then at the very top where the light would be hitting the most, I'm going to use my lightest shade, the YR21, to fill the rest of that in. And again, just using the very tip of that marker to get those fine little strokes. And then I'll also do the bird's beaks with those darkest 2 shades. And then I'm going to move on to another one of these branches, and I'm going to do some olive greens. I'm using YG93, YG95, YG97, and YG99. You probably could get away with using only 3 of these shades if you wanted to, but I just wanted there to be a really dark edge closest to the stem and then a really light highlight at the very tip of the leaf where it is the most transparent. So I am starting with the YG99 at the base, blending out with the YG97. I also use those darkest shades for the stem, and then I'm going to blend out with the YG95, and then I'm saving a little bit of room at the very tip of each of those leaves for the YG93. So I'll just fill those all in. And by the way, just to show you that inspiration can be everywhere, I actually pulled this color palette from the border at the top of my little calendar. So I just was looking around my desk and trying to come up with a color palette, and this was it. So I decided to run with it, and yeah, you can just pull color palettes from anywhere, from your favorite sweater, from a piece of wrapping paper, really and truly anywhere. I'm moving on to this last leaf cluster, and I'm going to use R00, R01, and R02. I also pulled out the R000, which I will use in a minute, but not on these branches, so I just went ahead and pulled it out at the same time. So I'm using the R02 closest to the stem, blending out with the R01, and then filling in the tip of each leaf with the R00. And I will go back and add in a second layer of the darkest two shades because I just wanted there to be a little bit more contrast there. So I added extra of the R02 and blended that out with a little more of the R01. Just really quick and easy, and I think it looked much nicer this way. And then I wanted to use these shades on the birds' bellies, but I'm going to skip the R02 this time. I'm starting with the R01 toward the back near the tail, and then blending forward with the R00, and then using a touch of the R000. And then for the cheek, I'm starting with the R02 and blending out with the R01. For the rest of the bird, I wanted to go with some purple shades. I'm using V91, V93, V95, and V99. Although I am going to realize when I start to color with the V93 that it is dried out. So I ended up skipping over that. So I started with the V99, adding the darkest at the edge of the wings and the base of the tail. And then I'm blending out with the V95, also putting a little V95 on the crown of the head, up toward the beak. And then there I'm using that V93 and realizing that it's not really doing anything there. So I'm going to just skip that and use the V91 to blend out and connect those shades together. And once I am done with that, I will do the second sheet of images, and then I will trim all of them out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and the cloud stencil, and I'm going to blend on some Distress Oxide inks. I wanted to have a pink sky, so it could either be sunrise or sunset. So I'm starting at the top with a little spun sugar and then adding in some saltwater taffy. Just a little of that saltwater taffy to make the edge of the cloud really more vibrant. And then I'm going to blend that out with the spun sugar. So I'm going to continue doing this down the panel. From now on, I'm just going to go ahead and start with the saltwater taffy and then blend out with the spun sugar. And kind of space those clouds out far enough between so that you get that soft, hazy, dreamy look. And I will continue to turn that stencil so that I get a different cloud formation each time. And if you run out, you can always just flip the stencil over, and then you'll have 4 more new variations that you can use. So I took that down about 4 times, and then I did add a little extra color down at the bottom. And I decided I wanted to add some grass though, so I wiped a little bit of that off with a baby wipe and pulled out my Drifts and Hills stencil. And I'm going to start with some Bundled Sage Distress Oxide ink and add that down at the bottom. And then I will add also some Rustic Wilderness to darken up the edges of that. And I'll bring that in from the two sides and the very bottom. And then just go back to the Bundled Sage Distress Blending Tool and just smooth out that transition between those two shades. And then I'll grab my Gansai Tambi Starry Colors and mix up this gold shade here and tap that all over the background using a thin pencil. So I'll get some fine gold splatters, and then I'll set this panel aside to dry. To stamp my sentiment, I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx Black ink because it lays really nicely over those Distress Oxide inks. And I am going to justify that sentiment over to the left and stamp out Happy Birthday from the whole flock. And then I will trim down that panel. In the meantime, I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI and stamp a sentiment on the inside. I'm going to add those two little birds and have a perfectly peaceful day. And I'm stamping that down a couple of times to make sure I have a nice impression. And then I wanted to use a piece of pattern paper from the Springing for Houndstooth 6x6. I'm actually going to go with this first sheet here with that mustardy yellow. And I'm going to trim down a thin strip of that. I'm going to glue that down to the right side of the card, just lining that up with the corners at the top and bottom right. And then I've added some foam tape to the back of the main panel. So I'll peel off those release papers and then line that up over on the left-hand side and smooth that down into place. Then I'll bring in my images and begin to stage the scene, starting with the birdhouse. I love that it has that really long pole that it's standing on, so you can decide how long you want that. You could trim it down if you wanted to, but I wanted it to be really nice and tall. I'm going to also add it a little bit over toward the left side of the card, and then I'll take one of these tall pod style flowers and I'm going to place that over on the left side coming out in front. Then I'll take that second set of those pods and add that over on the right hand side to balance that out. And I'm just using liquid glue for all of my images. Then I'll add the two pink leaves. I'm going to do the one taller cluster over on the left hand side and the slightly shorter one is going to go over on the right. So I'm just going to add those, kind of figuring out where I want them to go before I place them down so I don't get liquid glue everywhere. I did get a little bit there, but I knew that was going to get covered up by the green branches, so I didn't worry about that. So I'm going to add those next. And this time I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to use the taller one over toward the right and the shorter one over toward the left, just to mix it up a bit. And just making sure I have those where I want them and then pressing them down into place. And then I can add in my little birds. I'm going to have this one that is standing down at the bottom of the birdhouse on that little ledge. And then this one that is sitting is going to go up on the edge of the roof. And then I also have one that is flying, so I'm going to place that one down toward the lower right hand side, kind of coming out from between all of those little bits of foliage. Then to make this card a little extra special, I wanted to add a sprinkling of sparkling clear sequins. I just used a mix of sizes and I am gluing those down into place. And then I will grab some Stardust Stickles and add a little bit of sparkle to fill in the centers of each of those sequins. And that is going to look really pretty when you tip this card into the light. It'll just really sparkle and shine. So there you can see how that kind of looks. And I'll give you another peek at the inside. And that is going to finish up this card for today. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to leave me a comment down below and let me know. I'd love to hear your feedback. Make sure that you subscribe to My Favorite Things for more inspiring videos just like these here on screen. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.